Welcome to the Rachel Holmes podcast. I'm very excited because we've had a pre-podcast chat with my two guests. And I know that everybody listening and watching this on YouTube is going to be drinking all of this information up because it's so informative. So I'm going to introduce my guests. And firstly, I'm introducing Dr. Louise Oliver. She is a GP and she's based in Holmfirth in Yorkshire. And welcome to the podcast, Louise.
Thank you very much, Rachel.
And I'm excited to welcome my friend Charlotte Marsh, who's just over the other side of Derbyshire there, who is a Pilates teacher, and she is a breathing expert and a breathing coach and an author. Aren't you, Charlotte? Tell us about your book.
Thank you very much for having me. Good morning, everybody. So Susie Sloth, little picture of her behind me, and her secret superpower for little kids. Yeah.
So let's start with Susie Sloth, and then we can bring in the breathing. Where did Susie Sloth come from? Why did you decide to write the book? And how did you and Louise get together?
Oh, yes, there's a tale. So I can remember years and years ago, kind of writing a little lesson plans for children and being told that, you know, if I wanted some inspiration for lessons, go and look up some yoga stories because there wasn't a Pilates story in existence. And I didn't think much of it at the time, but it kind of stuck with me. And then years and years later, it got to lockdown. I stopped teaching my normal classes. I was doing some free sessions for families whilst we're all stuck at home, weren't we, over Facebook Live. And each week I'd write a little, you know, scenario, little story, as it were. And one of them was about a sloth. And then, I don't know, lockdown kind of finished. Kids went back to school. My classes didn't start back up again in the same way. And I thought, you know what? It's not right. It's not right that there are hundreds, actually almost thousands of yoga storybooks for kids. And one for Pilates doesn't exist. And I was like, no, we can do playful Pilates. You know, it should be just as big a thing as Yoga Kids is. So that's how she came about. So I wrote the story. I found an illustrator, went through the whole process, nearly killed me. I'm not ashamed to admit that I did nearly give up about 5 times, just from working the systems of the publishing process and everything. And I was, giving tiny little tweaks to illustrations for the posture of the body, doing a swan or something, because it was quite a detailed process with the illustrator. But then it got released last year. So it's coming up to its first birthday. And it's a combination. So it literally kind of takes you through a story. Then on every single page, there are Pilates moves, some of them, traditional Pilates moves, and then others that would be more of a fun transition for kids. So we play an elephant's water fight and, we have to stick our tongues out and there's child-friendly gags in there, about snot and poop and things like that. That's what they love, isn't it? Sloths have this secret superpower in that they control their breathing. So she then introduces 5 of her favourite breathing exercises and a better breathing lesson. And that's really how I came to meet Louise. Look at that. That was seamless, wasn't it?
Seamless.
Because the breathing exercises are all science-based exercises. One of them is a Buteyko exercise. And I'm a Buteyko breath coach, as is Louise. And so we met through that group and we wanted to raise awareness about the way that children breathe and how important that is. And that's really what I'm using the book for in schools. But yeah.
Fascinating. Wow, Charlotte. So Dr. Louise, how did you stumble upon breathing and where did you get into this?
Well, I think if I'm being completely honest, I probably got very disillusioned about being a GP in around 2018-19. And in my appraisal, we have to choose what we're going to learn about for the next year. So we have to spend nominally about 50 hours of learning. So you don't want to choose anything you're not interested in. Yeah. And I hadn't planned it that year. And mindfulness came out of my mind. And after I'd said it, I thought, oh, no, why have I said that? But then I went on a mindfulness for GP trainers course because I was GP training at that point. And she tagged the science to it and she absolutely caught my imagination. And then I understood then because it wasn't so woo-woo with it. Okay. And then she suggested read a book. And then I just went on this completely random, unstructured journey. And then along that way, I understood how breathing impacts our automatic nervous system, so the autonomic nervous system. And then I started to snore in my perimenopause. And then I had to realise I had quite a negative response to it, because I read the American definition of sleep disordered breathing and thought, I've not got sleep disordered breathing, and actually turned off the website and was like, didn't want to engage with that for about 2 days, and then came back to it and thought, right, get a grip. Okay, you've got sleep disordered breathing. I don't even want to think about how I've got here, right, what am I going to do about it? And then essentially I worked out I wasn't breathing efficiently, and I slowly improved how I breathed. And then suddenly I don't snore, my sleep's better, I can exercise with greater ease, all my running's with nasal breathing now, and I feel calmer. And I think, why on earth does nobody know this? This is ridiculous. And then I thought, right, I'll start to train people. And then I did the same training that Charlotte's done. And then I'm now trying to really raise awareness in the medical field, because this is we have a lot of our people with lots of chronic disease or frequent attenders at surgery. There's such a high rate of not breathing efficiently, and they can change that. They can change it.
Wow, that's mind-blowing. So how do you ascertain if somebody's not breathing correctly, or how does one know that they're not breathing correctly?
So it's really difficult, because we don't have a really simple tool that's really easy to use. So I've got a video on YouTube with my thoughts on it, and I don't know what Charlotte thinks, but the one easy thing to say is the mouth has no role in breathing at all. It does lots of functions, but the nose is designed to breathe. So, the only role the mouth has in breathing is making it inefficient. Now, I appreciate at very high levels of intense exercise, yes, you may need to do mouth breathing, but think how, when you're at rest, when you're just walking to the car, when you're sleeping, the mouth really shouldn't need to be open. And then there's other aspects, consider how you breathe when you're asleep. If you're sleeping with your mouth open, you're snoring, it's noisy, you've got gaps in breathing, your body's giving you feedback. And I've been there, and I know sometimes that you think you don't want to engage with this thought process, but essentially, if the breathing pattern's like that when you're asleep, that's your unconscious breathing pattern that has some element that could be improved. That when you're asleep, that's your unconscious breathing pattern, and if it's noisy, gaps in breathing, sleeping with your mouth open, there's some inefficiency there that can be looked at. There's another way you can sort of look at how you're breathing. Are you breathing using your diaphragm? Are you breathing more using your upper chest? And then we also, Charlotte and I, use a comfortable breath hold time, which is more useful in adults. So, but yeah, there's lots of different ways to assess it.
How do you start improving your breathing? Where do you start?
I think that is the first thing. Judge whether you can breathe through your nose. So you can literally, just as simple as, can you breathe through your nose for 3 minutes? Because if you can breathe through your nose for 3 minutes, you can breathe through your nose forever. And if you struggle to breathe through your nose, there are some people who, you might have a slight deviated septum, you might have something structurally, but again, there are little tips and tools that we can use. You can have little stickers that just go over the bridge of your mouth, and they literally just pull. It seems so negligible, but just a tiny little amount, and it just lifts the skin away and gives you slightly more open airway. You can put a little dilator up your nostrils. It's a really lovely look, but that will open up your airways. Something else which I find quite useful for people who kind of have quite a stuffy nose and things like that, you can do some sinus massage, some facial massage, and you can literally just, as you're trying to drop off to sleep, you can do this, or as you're putting on, a night moisturizer, just with the back of your knuckles, you can sort of imagine like a cat's whiskers, for kids especially, but that also works for grown-ups, doesn't it? And you just kind of, you can either do a slight percussion, just loosening up the sinus pads. You've got a couple here, and then you've also got one that goes just kind of on the inside of your eyebrow, and that can be a really releasing movement to do just before you're going to bed, because again, we hold a lot of tension within our faces that we don't realize, and jaws. So just a little bit of face massage, and it's actually quite a relaxing thing to do. I know quite a lot of teens now are into kind of facial massage and this kind of thing, so it's quite a nice thing for older kids to do. And then there's another one you can do, which is you literally take a breath in, take a breath out, and then you pinch your nose. And then if you just wobble your head, it sounds really random, but if you nod your head, if you shake your head like a yes and a no, and then when you release, you breathe in through the nose. And you might just find that those few things can just get you a little bit more open nasal passageways. And try and do that first, breathing through the nose.
We're also seeing on social media lots of talk about mouth taping. Do you advocate mouth taping? Is it something that people should be looking at, or should be doing those exercises first? Seems a bit scary to tape up your mouth, to be honest.
So it's one of those things where it's thinking about there's different ways of not breathing correctly. So obviously when I was snoring, I was definitely mouth snoring. So as soon as you get the mouth closed, there's no way you can mouth snore because your mouth's closed. But then I nasal snored. So definitely, so you can. I never knew you. There was two different types of you can mouth snore, you can nasal snore. So getting the mouth closed, yes, it will stop mouth snoring. And sleeping with the mouth closed is normal. That is how we've been designed. If you look at a newborn baby, we breathe in and out of our nose. There's nothing weird, there's nothing new about it. It's just modern society and various different things promote mouth breathing. That's what it is. But the only issue is just getting the mouth closed is only one aspect of not breathing well. So you've corrected that, but then I work with a lot of perimenopausal women, and actually we talk about strength training, and if we're not improving strength as we get older, they get weaker. Well, our tongue and our throat muscles are exactly the same. They get weaker, so then they're more likely to vibrate or collapse. So it's about correct tongue position. It's about getting the mouth closed, strengthening up the airway, using the correct muscles, breathing slowly, but also breathing the volume we've been designed to breathe. So if you imagine, as soon as we open our mouth is bigger than our two nostrils, and we start to breathe a bigger volume each minute. So in one study of healthy people, they started to breathe 800 milliliters more air per minute just by going from nose to mouth breathing.
Wow.
So there's this concept that I had to sort of get my head around, that, so if I'm mouth breathing, I am now over breathing. So I am breathing, I'm making my body work harder than it needs to do. Nobody needs to do that. And that's why I think that the two trainings that Charlotte and I have done, the Buteyko, it's about normalizing that breathing volume. So getting back to where we've been, what we actually need. And people with asthma in particular, they often very significantly overbreathe. We only need an adult would only need 6 litres of air per minute at rest. A really poor controlled asthmatic might breathe 15 litres of air per minute.
Wow.
And then if you imagine, if that person who's massively overbreathing suddenly tapes up their mouth fully, their nasal passage just won't be big enough to shift that in and out. And then that actually can contribute to and actually make sleep disorder breathing, in particular sleep apnea, worse. So I would always say, yes, it's absolutely crucial to get your mouth closed at night, but I always advocate getting a product that goes around the mouth, so if the body needed to breathe out, it can do. And that's what I suggest that my clients start off with first. And as you know, Rachel, with social media, everyone just wants the quick fix of the mouth tape, and they're not looking at all the rest of it. So yes, it's important, but I would always say use something around the mouth, not across, because you don't know if you're over breathing or not.
And I'm an asthmatic, so probably over breathe as well. That's really interesting.
There are specific tapes for children as well, that are much smaller, and they've got nice patterns on them, so Myotape does the kids version. But I think that's one of the things that's really important, because we've got an opportunity whilst children are young to actually address that. If they can be taught where their tongue should be, if they can get in a habit of mouth breathing, then their jaw will actually develop the right kind of shape, which will allow there to be enough space for their tongue to sit on the roof of their mouth. This is why trying to get this right from an early age will help children's lungs develop correctly, help their jaw develop correctly, etc. So earlier the better, really.
I see this in the surgery. So when I look in people's mouths now, the palates, so their roof of their mouth, different people have different shaped palates. So those that have mouth breathed a lot from when they were younger, they will have a tall, their palate, their roof of the mouth will be narrow and high, whereas ideally it should be more U-shaped. And if it's like that, so it's you actually then have, like Charlotte says, you end up having more space at the back. So those children that have developed their jaw properly are less likely to snort and have sleep apnea when they're older, compared to the child that's mouth breathed, or thumb sucking can do it as well. And if us not eating softer foods as well doesn't help as well. But yeah, there's a dramatic difference between the shape of the roof of the mouth. And actually now I understand that when I look, for years I've looked at the back of people's throats and think, oh, I can, the dangly bit that dangles down the back. So sometimes in some people I can see that really easily. I don't even need to use a tongue depressor. They just get them to go, and I can see it. And then other people I'm like battling, nearly breaking the tongue depressor, push the tongue down. And I now know that in those people that I'm battling to see the back of their throat, that means they've got less space at the back of their airway because it's crowded, and then they're going to be much more likely to snort and have sleep apnea.
Wow. Wow. That's incredible. So let's roll it back to our little ones then. How and when should we start with breathing techniques for our children?
Oh, I think honestly, the earlier the better. I mean, particularly because if you look at, I think one of the most fascinating things is literally the moment a baby is born, they move from not breathing to suddenly breathing. Like literally that whole system just turns on.
Excellent.
Obviously some children need some babies need a tiny bit of help, don't they, in that moment? But they're born with 20 to 50 million little air sacs already, within their lungs. But their lungs are very underdeveloped at that point, especially, if you think about any premature babies, that's what they really struggle with and need extra help with. But for saying that they're born with, some already working air sacs, it's not until they reach early adulthood that a person's lungs are fully formed, and we have 300 million air sacs by that point. So between the ages of newborn and 3, there's massive growth in their lungs. So any moment a baby is breathing, you can observe them, you can help them. Literally, if you see a baby with their mouth open, and in some cultures, parents do this, even school teachers do this. If you see a child with their chin, their jaw hanging down, you can literally just help them close their mouth and point it out, because I think a lot of times, when have we ever told a child how you should be breathing?
No, never.
We teach them how to brush their teeth, don't we?
Yeah.
We teach them how to hand wash for the full happy birthday, whatever it is these days. But we don't really ever explain that, or what can happen if they do start breathing too fast, the kinds of anxious feelings that can generate simply by breathing too fast and too much air, like Louise said before. So yeah, there's no time like the present. The earlier the better.
Okay. So any tips then? So just basically encouraging your little ones to keep the mouth closed and breathe through the nose. That's simple. That's
the really simple one. What comes with that, obviously, is being clear that they can breathe through their nose. Going into schools now, going into nurseries, going into young reception classes or key stage 1 classes. Yeah, it's a bit of a joke, but yeah, you're surrounded by snotty noses.
You really are just thinking that.
Well, children don't know how to blow their nose, do they? They need teaching how to clear their nose.
It's hard to teach, because my little boy is it's not easy to tell him how to blow with their nose. It's hard.
But I think even getting the kid to recognize that they're bunged up, I need some help. Can you help me blow my nose? Even if it's not them doing it in the beginning. But I actually advise parents to when you're brushing your child's teeth at bedtime, because parents all do that, you know, we all stand there and make sure they've scrubbed their teeth, don't we?
We do. We get in and do it.
You do it yourself, don't you? Or you sing a little brush your teeth song and, you know, get the job done. But I think part of a bedtime routine in the bathroom after they've brushed their teeth should be making sure their nose is clear, because otherwise, of course, your body has to breathe at night. If they're all bunged up, they are going to open their mouth and they are going to nose breathe. So helping them to either do it for them or just recognize that they need help to blow their nose, and then ultimately teaching them to blow their nose. And then there's all sorts of little games that you can play. I mean, we do one with you know, keeping the mouth closed and trying to blow a Cheerio across the dining table, you know,
that's
or the desk, stuff like that. Just, you know, making them realize that they can create a force that comes down their nasal passageway. So stuff like that, yeah, got to be done. Clear their nose at bedtime.
Okay.
And in the morning.
And in the morning, absolutely. And how to sneeze correctly.
Yeah. Well, and one thing they love to hear about is the force that's generated when a child sneezes. So that's in my school workshops, because you know, we get them to say, you know, have a guess, what's the fastest car that's allowed on English roads or wherever you are, you know, and they all come up with various illegal numbers. And then, but actually the fastest recorded sneeze is something like 130 kilometers per hour. So that's a massive force that a child can generate. And I've had a little boy in the class say, oh, that's too much power for me. They come out with the funniest things, don't they? But actually, sneezing is one of the first ways that women realise they've got osteoporosis, because they crack ribs. You know, it isn't to be sniffed at.
Good one, Charlotte.
I didn't mean to do that one. I've never come out with that before. But, you know, getting them to sneeze and let the power out. Yeah, exactly.
Good. Louise, I know you've been delving into the research. What's the research saying? And is there any research that's been done with nasal breathing in children and nasal breathing in adults?
It's a really exciting time, actually, because we are getting some more research out. We need lots and lots more, but the sort of one headline we have put in our blog that we've generated together, and it's so scary. So this is from a study that was it was 2012, I think. And I actually, to be honest, I'm a little bit disappointed. Not a lot's happened since it. So it was published in 2012. Pediatrics, a really well-respected journal, and essentially they did a study of over 11,000 children, and they found an association that if the children were mouth breathing, snoring, or holding their breath, or had pauses in breathing while sleeping before the age of 5, they had had an increased likelihood of special educational needs by 8.
Wow.
And I read this, and I actually, to be honest, I'm quite tearful, because I think 2012 in a major pediatric journal. Wow. It's an observational study, so you can say that just because there's an association, it's not cause and effect. But I've looked at the research at what happens to adult brains. So a developed brain that has sleep disorder breathing, we get damage in the hippocampus. So that is the area of the brain involved in memory and learning. And the damage is, when they've done studies, the damage, you can correlate that with the severity of the obstructive sleep apnea. So you're not telling me that this isn't relevant, you know? And I did see a statement based on that study, and I can't find it now, but it's from the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health, and it was fairly weak, and said, yes, this is an interesting observation, it deserves further research. And I'm like, you're talking about special educational needs, a 40% increased likelihood. This is not, you need to be firing on all cylinders here and throwing money at this to stop this, because this is a disaster. And the trouble is, we've got a rising obesity epidemic, and unfortunately what I've noticed is, as people tend to gain weight, they tend to be more likely to mouth breathe. And one of the issues is, and again, people don't realise, and I didn't know this myself until recently, the first place we put weight on is the tongue.
Oh, wow. I didn't know.
The first place we put weight on is the tongue and the back of the throat. You've narrowed your airway. So you are making it more likely. But the trouble is, it's a horrible vicious circle that if you don't breathe well when you're asleep, it completely changes your satiety hormones, your hunger hormones, your cortisol levels. So you're more likely to put on more weight. So just saying to someone lose weight, it's the first thing we need to do is recognize you're not breathing well. So then you're not sleeping well, and we need to sort of stop this. And I'm hoping that our blog, I've already messaged someone who's very high up in the pediatric world, medical wise. I've got a consultant who was interested in our work at one of the Sheffield Children's Hospitals, because and as soon as you talk to them, they're like, oh, I know what you mean. They understand it, but it's trying to get this. We need, and it could be as simple as Charlotte says, at the beginning of the journey, it can be so simple that parent needs to know the importance, or caregiver, importance of nasal breathing. And what I would love is, if we've got people that are involved with children, whether it be social workers, health workers, or teachers, if you spot a child persistently mouth breathing, feed that back to the caregiver. It's just an observation, and then perhaps suggest reading our blog, because you might change things for that child. And obviously not forgetting, of course, children mimic adults. So don't just look at the child, look at perhaps yourself as a parent. I probably didn't breathe very well from when I was 10. And one of my children didn't breathe so well when they were little. Maybe the way that I was breathing impacted my child's breathing. So, and you could be on the journey with your child, trying to reestablish nasal breathing yourself.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's interesting with mouth breathing, I imagine, I don't know the full stats, is the effect on dental health. And we're also seeing this huge issue with dental problems in the UK. People can't get in to see the dentist, et cetera, et cetera. So this is all linked as well, isn't it? Do we have any studies that correlate with, or any information that correlates children who are mouth breathers? Does that have an effect on cavities, mouth health, et cetera?
Massively. It's as soon, dentist, definitely, if your mouth's dry, if your teeth aren't covered in saliva, you'll end up with more damage. So definitely. And dentists are in such a good place to actually notice the first signs of a child not breathing well. I'm not convinced England, we are not at the forefront of this. Other countries are. And certainly I am seeing clients, patients. I know someone who's training in a European country, and I know people who are being trained here, and they are, there's a difference in how they're being taught. I'm seeing dentists who are being trained in different countries that they are encouraging their children of the importance of nasal breathing, using appliances to help grow their airway. Whereas unfortunately in this country, I'm still seeing teeth being pulled. So there's still this concept that the teeth are crooked, let's pull out teeth. But actually in other countries, and I'm not a dentist, so I'm not an expert in this, but other dentists in other countries are asking, is it that the teeth are crooked because the child's not been allowed to grow their jaw? And I've literally seen a child that has used a palate expander, and literally their palate grew and their teeth straightened out. They did not need to be pulled.
Yeah, the fact that, there's a whole person's profession called myofunctional therapy that literally work with the muscles of the mouth, the jaw, the tongue, the nose. They work with the whole person. So if, for example, a baby has a tongue tie, or a child has a tongue tie identified later, they might need some myofunctional therapy to then readdress the imbalance of muscles in that area. But also, if we are pulling teeth, there's a chronic pain implication for that as well, because the way your brain assesses your proprioception, where you are in the world, and it is very often through how your jaw relays information. So if you have too many teeth taken out, and I speak from personal experience, then then you get a confused message. And then I think this links nicely back into the Pilates piece, because we're always talking about balancing people's postures, and we all have habitual kind of habits, don't we, that we need to work on. But that's one of these things. So the earlier we can actually have optimal breathing, get the jaw shape as best as we can. Obviously, genetics play a part, and like you say, you know, children copy parents too. But that's another really key reason for doing this early.
Oh, it's fascinating. As someone who has asthma, had horrific jaw surgery in my late teens, had tons of had tons of teeth pulled out, wore braces, for the most aggressive braces in the 90s. I know,
That's what,
probably was all breathing.
Oh, absolutely. It's crazy, isn't it? And yet, I've been to an appointment with one of our teenagers and said, you know, well, I actually tried to discreetly email the dentist in advance and say, could you just reiterate to her on my behalf the importance of nasal breathing while she has this device on. And he absolutely poo-pooed me in front of her and said, yeah, we deal with evidence-based research. And I nearly fetched out a Cure book by Patrick McEwen, and you know, but yeah, it's unfortunately, I think dental treatment and the dental industry is quite controversial because obviously orthodontal work in itself is a, you know, it's an industry, a standalone industry, isn't it? So I think that's one of the reasons.
Wow, this is so. Where can we go? So we listening to this podcast and watching us, we're going to have hundreds of group exercise Pilates instructors all around the country who are probably just the same as I am. Wow. We can help. We can help spread this message. We can help get involved. So first of all, where would we start? How do we sort of get some more knowledge around this?
Well, I think with the Pilates piece in particular, there've been statistics by Kindred Squared earlier this year that children who are starting school now are not toilet trained. 50% of children starting school are not able to sit still, partly because they lack the core strength available to them to do so. So I think there is a real opportunity with Pilates, and you know, school teachers are now going back and doing crawling exercises in order to make little children's core stronger. And if you haven't had the opportunity to look at child development, I think one thing which is, you know, so valuable as fitness teachers is that actually the way that children develop is that if you build their gross motor skills, if you build their core muscles, it directly translates into their cognitive skills, their speech and language skills, their fine motor skills for holding a pencil. You know, so anything you do with one part of a child's development
as a global
immediately improves the rest. So I think trying to get, you know, Pilates in with children at a early age, and then really just starting very basics of, you know, whether it's there's a Buteyko app that has some children's breathing exercises on it, and that's free for end user, so that's available. The Better Breathing lesson in the back of Susie Sloth has little fun, you know, practical things that you can do. It's actually really nice to do those as a family to help children, because that's the beauty of a kid's book, actually. You are teaching the child, but somebody has to read that book to them. So you're actually teaching the family one way or another. And then, I'm trying to get this into more schools with a workshop. So we teach Pilates, and we also do the breathing exercises together with lots of, you know, silly props and games, and it's very playful. But I think those would be some great starting points. And if you want to improve your own breathing, I'll hand it over to Louise, because you've got an option for that too.
Okay.
So I mean, I've got I'm more work with sort of more adults really. So but I've got lots of information on my website, and I'm active on Instagram and Facebook, so there's lots of information there. And I do a group virtual course, so you can get some information there, and also run individual programs as well. But I suppose from your group of fitness professionals, obviously it's quite normal when you're exercising, you're going to breathe heavier, and it obviously is always going to be more difficult to train your breathing, particularly nasal breathing, whilst exercising, because you're creating more carbon dioxide. It's more difficult. I suppose, first of all, just having that knowledge that the most efficient most efficient breathing is in and out of the nose. The least efficient is in and out of the mouth, and then the in between is in through the nose and out through the mouth. So, if there's periods of time, maybe in a class where it's calmer, maybe then reminding people to go back if they can, to go in, when they're doing perhaps the stretch at the end or the beginning of the warm up, can you breathe just in and out of your nose, and then almost having these different levels that obviously it might be at the beginning you've got to still breathe in and out of the mouth at some point, but you're much more likely to end up in anaerobic metabolism when you're breathing in and out of your mouth, which obviously then produces more lactic acid and more waste products that we don't like. Whereas if you can maintain nasal breathing with exercise, you're more likely to remain in aerobic metabolism, which is just your carbon dioxide and your water. I think one thing in the sports world that sometimes I think we overlook, correct me if I'm wrong, Rachel, is we sometimes say take a bigger breath to get more oxygen.
Yeah.
And I think just the one thing is, when we breathe in, this is at sea level, 21% of the air we breathe in is oxygen, and when we breathe out, there's still 16% oxygen in it. So we're throwing out the oxygen we're not using.
Wow.
So taking and even when we're exercising at peak level, we're still throwing out oxygen. There's never zero oxygen in the exhale breath. So to say take a bigger breath in to get more oxygen, it's scientifically it's incorrect, because you've got excess oxygen, you're throwing it out of your lungs. The issue is getting the oxygen to be released to the cells, and that's related to carbon dioxide, which is probably a bit more complicated to go in. That I've got stuff on my website about it, but we can train ourselves to be more tolerant to carbon dioxide, and it's that helps oxygen release. So I hope I've not upset any fitness instructors by saying that, but it's scientifically true. So
we need this. We really do need this. Any tips
we
for
do say that to children as well, don't we? Take a deep breath to try and calm them down.
Yeah, all the time.
It's not accurate. You want to sort of say to them, let it go, let it go. You want them to try and extend that exhale breath. That's what they'll get the calming result from. So really, take a deep breath just needs to be scratched pretty much from everybody.
Yeah, you're right.
But I think it's things like that parents as well do need explaining. I've got a few tips about that with my website freebie. So there is a parent's guide on there, and there are so many books about breathing now. I mean, who we've studied with, Patrick McEwen, one of the most comprehensive books is The Breathing Cure. I've put a little reading list together, so there's lots of other options there if people do want to learn a little bit more. And ultimately, I think the blog which we've published together, is a really good starting point, because it has got some of those research studies linked, and hopefully that will get shared amongst parents and teachers, and start getting the word out.
Well, maybe this is just the beginning. Maybe we could do or facilitate a workshop for instructors to help them, to give them some tips. Because I was just coming to mind when you were speaking, Louise, was breathing when you're teaching. So that's a challenging one, where, especially for a Pilates teacher who's constantly talking, coaching, talking, breathing, and you get into really bad habits as a teacher. And I think even more so, maybe the instructors who are teaching high energy, fast paced cardio workouts, shouting, teaching, breathing over and over again, year after year, decade after decade. What is that doing?
That's really true. There's someone who is he actually holds one of the world's longest breath hold records. But when you hear him speak when he's teaching others breath work, coaching, he will take his inhale. So you have to wait to listen. And then he speaks on his exhale. Mm-hmm. Then he will pause. He'll take a gentle, light, not deep breath. And then he only speaks on his out breath. It's so unusual to observe in the first instance. And I think it would be a very hard habit to do, but you're absolutely right. You know, high impact, you know, spin instructors or something, when you're
Wow.
working as well, you know.
And singing
And I
and the
think,
music. Oh, hard.
Yeah.
and I think that's the one thing that I think this is recognition. So certainly one of the reasons why I started snoring was because I overbreathe when I talk. But I'm in a rush at work. I cannot talk like that unless someone's. I talk like that when I'm guiding a breathing exercise or someone's depressed because I'm mimicking their pace of speech. But I can't do it. I see people too quickly at work. So I accept now that I overbreathe when I talk. And that's because I want to concentrate what I'm doing. I'm enthusiastic. I'm probably a bit of an extrovert. So I accept that I overbreathe when I'm talking, which is probably what a lot of fitness instructors might have to accept. But then there's a recognition then I have a maintenance breathing practice where I essentially underbreathe each day to make sure I correct my overbreathing from my speech. And that's what's kept my breathing instead of going backwards.
Oh,
so
wow.
And certainly I've worked with professional singers that I'm not going to interfere with how they sing. They need to overbreathe when they sing because they need to get all this air in to then produce this beautiful sound. And there's no way I want to interfere with that. But then there's a recognition, or how do you breathe the other 23 hours of the day or the other 20 hours of the day? And you can, when you train your breathing to be better, you're not breathing as hard. So if you imagine there's different levels of breathing efficiency. So I wasn't efficient, but now my breathing at rest is very slow and gentle. So I can do so much more exercise before I reach my peak breathlessness. And again, that would be with fitness instructors, that you can train your resting breathing rate to be slower and gentler. So that can be helpful. But yes, probably fitness instructors will overtalk and overbreathe, but then recognizing that, right, that's part of my occupation. What can I do to offset that? So
gosh, I mean, you really, that was, I'm mind blown because I know I'm an overtalker, overbreather, that was such a good comment, because I think whenever we hear this information on anything related to human body anatomy, we all think, right, yes, we can do this, we can change, we can help everybody. And then you realize the enormity of it. You think, oh my gosh, this is massive. Where do I start? And then and you've just broken that down really nicely, Louise, by saying, accept that this is how you teach, and but there's other ways and other points in the day that you can improve. And I really love that point. That makes you think, yeah, we can do this. Wow. What an amazing conversation. Louise, where can people go to now to find out more about you, your blog, and the work that you're doing?
So if you put in Dr. Louise Oliver blog in Google, you should get the blog post up, and the latest one is the one that Charlotte and I have got. It's on my website. So and all my social things are at the bottom of my website. My email's at the bottom as well.
And you've got a YouTube channel where you've got videos on as well. Yeah. And you're very active on Instagram as well, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant. Okay. Charlotte, where can everybody find out about Susie Sloth and your breathing course and information?
So my website's benefitsofbetterbreathing.co.uk, and on Instagram I'm Better Breathing or Susie Sloth _ secret superpower, and you'll find everything on there.
I love that. Thank you, ladies, so much for your time this morning. I really appreciate it. It's been fascinating.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.